Let's not be too depressed. At least you've got it better than the orcas, right, big guy? You know, giraffes are social animals, so being the only one on exhibit, it's not ideal, but gives me lots of free time to play video games. In fact, at this point, I've probably played every genre there is, even those Newgrounds dress-up games when the zookeepers weren't looking. And I've had plenty of free time just to think about them, critiques, good or bad. And you know what? You came all the way to this rundown little zoo just to see me. Let me review a game for you. And I'll even do something special. I'll review my favorite game of all time, Monster Hunter World. To start off, I'm not the type of gamer who spends infinite time plugged into a single game. Despite my lifelong affair with them, the only games I think I've ever put 1,000 hours into are Pokemon Fire Red, if you count ROM hacks, RuneScape, Call of Duty Black Ops 1, and Monster Hunter World. The only one of those I'd gladly spend another 1,000 in is World. I'd like to go back to the Call of Duty days also, but I think we all know we don't really miss the games, we miss the homies. But we're not here to talk about sad things. It's time for Monster Hunter World. This game starts with an unskippable cutscene mixed with lengthy sequences of walking and talking. Everyone hates these. If the game developer wants to hold my hand so much, they should just be honest with their feelings, I fuck on the first date, I'm receptive. The main problem is the games that do this always have chicken and rice stories. They're so plain. Monster Hunter World isn't about the narrative, it's about the 50 Rathalos I need to kill to get a single gem, and I love that. This isn't Shadow of the Colossus. That was the big deal with World 2, this janky little series that had been on handhelds for so long, finally getting some AAA amenities. But I think they lost the thread a bit. The campaign is really annoying to get through sometimes, especially if you're trying to replay it. But maybe I'm just being nitpicky so I sound fair, since I'm going to praise so much other stuff. Back to the plot, once you arrive in the hub, you start getting quests. These first ones are real good. I consider this a soft reboot of the franchise. This is a brand new era for the franchise, so you gotta take it slow and introduce new players to their weapons and such. So you go assault some locals, before taking on any real challenge. It's a smart idea, but a lot of the weapons are so complex, this doesn't really help. You really gotta know what players can and can't get on their own just from mashing buttons, otherwise players turn to those filthy YouTube tutorials. It's like a doctor checking a guy for hemorrhoids. Then he turns around and gets a second opinion. What an asshole. Aside from the weapons, this early tutorial is amazing. I was new to Monster Hunter, so I want to focus on the first handful of monsters you fight. This big greedy fuck is Great Jagras. He's just a punching bag that serves as a base for monsters to build on. Next is Kuliaku. As a step up, it's faster, it's smaller, and it picks up rocks that you can bounce off of. This obviously teaches you the mechanic of weapon bouncing and having to hit certain parts of the monster. Then Puke Puke introduces status ailments, and look, I know it's been said, but they did not have to give this guy a pocket pussy for a tail. That is just vile, and then it starts gushing all over you. I think this game was, this game was made in Japan. If there's one thing a Japanese office worker knows, it's his way inside a pocket pussy, so no excuse. Anyway, next is Baroth. The first monster from an older game, actually. He's next to teach players about monster forms. Some monsters have modes or forms that change the fight. Baroth covers himself in shit that changes his elemental resistance and breaks off to make little hazards. Then Giratodith also has the same mud. This teaches you environmental hazards, though, because he's always in water that slows you down. People talk a lot of dongpot about Giratodith and the other early monsters, honestly, for not being hard or interesting like early monsters in previous games, but you gotta, first of all, shut the hell up, but also understand that these monsters exist for the tutorial. They acclimate the player to the gameplay much better than Great Macau or the other 70 Velociraptors in previous games. You progress through the game like this until it's go time. That monster from the opening cutscene, we're going to build a giant white van around it and close the door. This is the first of 2, maybe 2.5 siege quests. Monster sieges have existed since the first game, and the scale of these monsters is pretty impressive. It's just a shame they all suck. I hate these kind of variety gimmick levels. They're different from the main game, so you think it's going to be new and fun, but you realize, oh, this isn't as good as the main game. If turn sequences were so fun, rail shooters wouldn't be dead as a genre, that's all I'm saying. The game makes up for this with high rank right afterwards. It's such a simple concept, but oh, all the monsters are stronger now. Go fight them all again. They get new moves, and they generally are more aggressive, and they're also larger, so their attacks can be harder to avoid. It's like tile defense and punch out. It's really fun. You could call this lazy or recycling, which it is, but the combat's so good you enjoy having an excuse to fight these things again. Then once you advance through high rank enough, doing a lot of what you did in low rank, you reach the boss gauntlet of Elder Dragons. As a new player, man, these things kicked my ass. I was using the charge blade all wrong. I was a complete scrub, but I still think Valhazok's unique status was a terrible idea. Like, it really sells how dangerous and how powerful they are, at least before you recreate that mountain of bison skulls just to farm their armor. But that's okay, because the Nergigante fight was perfect. No BS, just one-on-one against this razor blade dildo that has been bothering you the whole game. Or not. Monster Hunter was developed as a multiplayer experience, so that is kind of the intended way to play. Lots of skills, items, and some of the weapons only show their true potential in multiplayer, but the opposite is also true. Charge Blade is a weapon I think works best alone, due to the guard point mechanic. In general, it's nice to know when the monster is targeting you or not, so you can react properly. Lots of attacks extend to the side or behind the monster more than you'd think, so you get tagged in some pretty ridiculous ways. The final boss is really something too. It takes the JRPG approach of a being of pure energy being the final boss. This thing is huge too, easily bigger than anything you've encountered aside from Zora Magdaros. I think the implication is that it's an alien, but if space is just full of dragons, I'm more worried about that than whatever's happening on this one little island. The final boss is really fantastic, but it's not hard at all. The only difficulty comes from whiffing your attacks constantly, which is more, the size of it than the AI. I can't help but love this thing though. At the time, it was probably the biggest monster you could fight like normal. No heavy artillery, no underwater combat, no being a frickin' mammoth. But no worries, that's not even the end. The DLC is basically a repeat of the base game in terms of content, just with the new master rank. And I didn't know about G rank from previous games or anything my first time through, so this pissed me off actually. See, the base game may have had an easy final boss, but it more than made up for that with tempered and arch-tempered versions of monsters, plus the Behemoth super boss. I worked my taint off grinding Behemoth to get that badass Dragoon armor set, which is super OP. Then the first monster in master rank gives you better armor. Just like that. It's like 50% more defense than anything you could get in the base game. You just throw your old shit away no matter how good the skills are on it. Like, I wouldn't have put so much effort if I knew it was going to be invalidated 5 minutes in the DLC. Okay, yeah, actually I would have, but I'm still mad. Like I said, the DLC just repeats the base game. New monsters introduced, progress the plot, Elder Dragon boss gauntlet, and final boss. Which is also basically a redo of Xeno'jiiva, but I don't like this thing as much. The rock form is cool. I kinda wish it just stayed as a rock and maybe the wings broke off to show the little skeleton fingers, and maybe have a little mystique to it, but all the rocks fall off. I mean, what the fuck, this thing looks delicious. I can't take this seriously. The fight is great, and actually much harder than Xeno'jiiva though. The post-game content is really weird this time. You unlock the last map called the Guiding Lands. It's some horrific Frankenstein of all the previous maps. The idea being you can just go to the Guiding Lands and dick around for hours. Every monster, minus the giant ones, can show up here. and you can summon specific ones you want to fight. The monsters give unique material, and there are special mining nodes and bone piles. These are the spots you usually gather resources from in the map. This all gives you material you need for the post-game upgrades, like augmentations, but also some armor and weapons require it. This is such a good idea to just make a sandbox for every monster in the game. But wow, does it suck! The idea is that the area is a massive time sink, so you can just play a shit ton and always have something else to do. Which is the name of the game, but I'd rather just do harder quests. I really believe this was an attempt to recapture the culture of Monster Hunter lobbies from previous games. Those games didn't have the ability to join mid-quest. You had to have your party all ready and leave together. This led to people forming a party, sitting around, talking a bit, and then departing. Most often you formed a party, then took turns picking the quests, so you'd help out with 3 quests and then get your turn to get help with whatever quest you wanted to complete, and repeat. It had a charm, but SOS quests are just so much better. Instead of randoms being paired up, the SOS signals allow people to pair up based on the quest. It's simple. All the people who want to hunt, say, Odogaron, go to the left. Anyone who wants to hunt, Diabolos, go to the right. Instead of mixing the two groups, and if you don't have anything you want to grind for, you can just browse quests like you're window shopping in Amsterdam. An annoying bit of post-game content are the 2 raid bosses, Kulva Taroth, which is kind of a rework from her higher rank Siege, and Safi Jiva, the adult form of the base game's final boss. Both are totally fine fights, actually a ton of fun, but they take turns being available. 1 month you get Kulva Taroth all month, and then next month you get Safi. If you wanted to grind one for its gear, some of which being the best in the game, eat shit. See you in a month, fucko. Like, I get locking stuff behind your hunter rank, but these two don't even conflict. Kulva Taroth is an event quest, and Safi Jiva is a siege you initiate in the Gathering Hub. No reason for them to still be mutually exclusive at this point. And now we're at the end. 2 monsters left. Both super bosses, completely different reputations. Alatreon and Fatalis, the 2 black dragons. I know you tend to expect a YouTube commentator to bring a contrarian opinion, but nah, Alatreon is every negative stereotype you've heard, but Fatalis is responsible, lawful, he listens to jazz. For those that don't know, Alatreon is a fight focusing on elemental damage. You have to deal a certain amount of elemental damage to Alatreon, or else you basically get instant killed by its Nova, with no way to avoid it. Nothing else in the game comes close to this level of restrictive. And even if you meet the threshold, the Nova still kills you unless you stack some healing effects or properly time certain healing items like a max potion. This was probably done because they saw how little people were using elemental builds, but that was purely their fault. People didn't prefer non-elemental weapons for no reason. It's because most endgame monsters just didn't take enough elemental damage to justify it. If they just made Alatreon take way more elemental damage compared to physical damage, everyone would have still gone for elemental builds. It's strictly a numbers game, they just had to make it work. Instead, they crawled under the player like they were about to grind our shit into dust, and laid hands on us instead. Fatalis, then, is the true final boss of the game, after Alatreon. And man, what a recovery. What a Goku get him attitude the developers must have had to produce this masterpiece. He's very different to other monsters. I'd say he's more like a 30-minute long Dark Souls boss. He has the most health of any normal monster, hits the hardest, and is the only normal quest in the game to have a 30-minute time limit. But everything just works into place. He hits hard, but he's pretty slow and well telegraphed. He has lots of health, but you get some heavy artillery to help deplete big chunks of it. In fact, this is the only time in the entire series I can think of that they really nailed heavy artillery. It's not required, it's just in the map, for you to take advantage of, and it blends into the fight very well because it's not scripted, it's just an option. I'm not even good at this fight. I've beaten him a few times with a party, but I've only beaten him once solo. This boss is designed for multiplayer, but I seriously recommend putting some effort into doing it solo. It's an amazing experience. I'm glad Fatalis is the end of this game, because it's such a high note that it lets you look back on the rest of the game favorably. Monster Hunter is a pure series. Just have fun, go fight. I totally get why people reacted negatively to the story. It's really suffocating. Like the Oda quest where you rescue this old lady and your handler starts bawling her eyes out over her being safe, but you don't care. You're just thinking, man, Oda was so awesome. I wish this middle schooler would shut up so I could go hunt more of them. Get that armor that shows off my cheeks. Man, people hated the handler so much. It's not just that she's goofy looking, she straight up hijacks the story. She runs out, and much like a mountain lion and a special ed kid, the monsters know she's easy prey, so they always swoop in on her. Then you save her, and the whole cast for some reason goes, boy, that pair sure are something, like it was a team effort. All she does is sit on her fat ass, stuffing her fat face, while I'm out here busting my fat ass, stuffing fat loads into the monster's fat ass face. You know they barely made any porn of her on the internet? What an insult! The internet loves doing that! They made more porn of Kulva Taroth. Which, you know. You hunt Kulva Taroth long enough, you start to see it, but never like that, never to that extent. The game is crazy flexible too, which means something specific to me. Flexibility is when a game lets you make your own choices without railroading you too much. Like, if I made a choice that immediately killed me or disallowed me from smashing, it wasn't a choice, it was a test. And I don't need that crap. Monster Hunter doesn't do that. Even if you made all the wrong choices with your build, you can still beat anything other than Elatreon without much issue. This is how I like my games. Give me a lot of freedom to choose how I play, but, let some skill element make up for bad choices. Not that I make bad choices, though. I know all the good skills. It's so fun making your build. It's like solving a puzzle. You need to get just the right armor skills and the right decoration slots, but you still want to look cool. And whatever answer you get is the right one. It might make the game a little harder or easier, but it's your build. One issue I have, which isn't even that big of a deal in World, but it appears in so many other action games, is that certain attacks are unblockable, but they don't look all that different. Grabs and Novas make sense. Novas being the special attacks certain monsters do once or twice in a hunt, mostly Elder Dragons. And then some random projectile is unblockable too. Like Sekiro gives nice Windows pop-ups when an unblockable is coming, but just some consistency would be nice. Honestly, if just grabs or Novas were unblockable, then this wouldn't be an issue. They aren't even that common, I just wanted to bring this up for future games as well. I was also going to talk about, graphics, art style, and the honestly fantastic music. But I'm no expert, so screw that. Did you know Kirin is the Japanese word for giraffe? I've been waiting to say this the whole time, but it never came up. I really like this fact, because Kirin's a mythological thing that existed for centuries before a Japanese person probably ever saw a giraffe. That means some poor 5'3" samurai maybe went traveling and saw this 16-foot tall monster and just thought he was looking at the Japanese equivalent of a unicorn. I love stories like that. I mean, Europe did the exact same thing. They got some giraffe skeletons or stories about them and birthed this thing. It's called a questing beast. They thought the giraffe's neck went horizontal and acted like a snake. That's so awesome. I wish Monster Hunter made something based on it. And the only thing left is the performance, maybe the polish, but this is a AAA game. It's just really solid. Is what I would say, but this isn't just a AAA game, this is a AAA Monster Hunter game. It's got some jank. I don't expect perfect performance from a game, but the one thing I want to talk about is a little quirk with the AI. Some monsters really, really like to repeat moves. Specifically roaring. Monsters love to roar. When two monsters see each other, they roar multiple times like they haven't talked since college. You might as well just put down the controller and take a piss, because it's going to be a minute. Oh, check this out. I actually got this clip while recording footage for this video. Like, I know it's technically a newborn, but what an idiot. It really does have its charm, but I think a single line of code preventing repeated actions would be nice. But hey, that's my 2 cents. And now that we're here, let me ramble a little bit more, because this is a special game to me. I first played this when I was working my way through college. Giraffe college. For about 3 years, I never had a day off. I woke up early for college, came home for lunch, and went straight to work till night. I worked every weekend too. You see, Mama Giraffe and little brother Giraffe were disabled. So whenever I was home, I also needed to be helping out, and I was still responsible for a lot of household chores. This wasn't torturous or anything, but it got stressful, especially with how long I did this. I'm a JRPG player by nature. I love following complex, long-winded fantasy stories. But back then, I could barely get it up for Persona 5 when I actually sat down to play. That's when Monster Hunter World entered my life. I had tried and bounced off of previous Monster Hunter games, but this one was on good consoles with good controls and shiny new graphics. In the middle of all this back and forth stress, I sat down to play a game that, after a bit of cutscene, just sort of let me loose. I didn't have to earn these epic fights by surviving a dungeon crawl. They weren't once per playthrough. I could fight whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and it was all fun. I still remember the moment I was hooked. I decided to fight an Anjanath during an expedition well before I should have. I was still so new to the game that this was an epic back and forth brawl. I had no potions. I had forgotten to sharpen my weapon for a while, and I had already gotten the message that the Anjanath would be leaving the locale soon. I finally engaged the Anjanath in its nest, and after a chest-pounding exchange, it fell. I had slayed my first of hundreds of Anjanath. My hands were sweaty, my chest was light, and I later realized I'd completely forgotten some homework I had due that night, because I was playing a video game and I was having fun. So who cares if this game has a few flaws, and so what if the story takes up a little too much time in the beginning? At the end of the day, Monster Hunter is a series that you can just sit down and play. One of the last of its type. You don't need to follow the plot, memorize a dungeon layout, or even progress the plot. Most of the time, when you sit down, all that matters is you, Oda Garen, and this big fucking gun between us. Thanks for watching the video this far. Honestly, I thought this video would be a little longer, but my thoughts are pretty set on World at this point, so I didn't do a whole lot of exploring with my ideas. And hey, for anyone interested in me reviewing Monster Hunter Wilds as soon as it comes out, probably not. I don't think my computer can run that one based on the beta, but that's okay. Because I still got World. And you'll all come back to World. Just like after Monster Hunter Rise. You'll all be back. Someday.